Chapter 1. My phone screen glowed, then dimmed, then glowed again. The class group chat was exploding. Green message bubbles rose like overgrown aquatic plants. It was the class of 2026 group chat, created years ago, usually as quiet as a tomb. During holidays, someone would send a red envelope, and only a few would bother to claim it. But not today. The class president, Mark Liu, had posted an announcement 4 days ago. Our class's 12-year graduation reunion is this Saturday at 6 p.m. in the Peony Room at the Royal Imperial Hotel. $75 per person. We'll settle the difference later. Please reply to confirm. 200 messages over 4 days. I scrolled through them. People discussed who was successful and who wasn't. Someone posted a picture of the steering wheel of their new BMW. Someone else said they just got promoted to director and were busy but had to come. Another person shared their location, saying the hotel was right next to their office. A 5-minute walk. At the very bottom. Mark had tagged everyone. At all. Final day to confirm. If you haven't replied, hurry up. My profile picture sat quietly at the bottom of the member list. I hadn't sent a single message. I flipped the phone over and put it on the desk. There was a stack of documents in front of me. The top file was stamped with the logo of Summit Capital. Reading. Investment Committee. Proposal number 47. On the final page, in the signature block, my name was listed first. Ms. Summers, do you need to sign the quarterly report for Fund 3? My assistant, Emily Chun, knocked twice and walked in, placing an Americano on the corner of my desk. I glanced at it. Signed. What time am I off? You have a 7 p.m. conference call. Nothing after 8. Are you leaving early tonight? Yeah. High school reunion. Emily paused. She'd worked for me for almost 3 years, and I'd never mentioned a high school reunion. I kept to myself, work, home, rarely attending team-building events. Her face registered a subtle confusion, the kind reserved for discovering your boss had a social life. She nodded and left. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. Summit Capital's office was on the 47th floor of the financial center. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. The setting sun was wedged between two buildings, painting the glass facades with an orange-gold glow. I'd been here for 6 years. Started as an intern, made VP in 3, then spent 2 years leading my team to 3 unicorn projects. I was voted the youngest managing partner by the partnership committee at the end of last year. But my high school classmates didn't know that. In their eyes, I was still the same Sarah Summers from 12 years ago. The skinny girl with the faded uniform, buying just 2 plain buns and free soup for lunch, whose parents never showed for parent-teacher conferences. Sitting alone in the back corner of the room. I owned a few nice outfits. But when I left today, I dug out an old gray hoodie from the back of my closet. The cuffs pilling, the collar soft from too many washes. Jeans I'd bought on sale years ago. Worn canvas sneakers. In the mirror, I looked exactly as I had 12 years ago. No makeup, hair in a messy ponytail. Entirely gray and unremarkable. I wasn't trying to put on an act. I just wanted to see if, after 12 years, they'd still treat me the same way. I took a cab. The Royal Imperial Hotel was on the city's busiest downtown street. The lobby soared several stories high, with a crystal chandelier hanging like an inverted icicle. I paused at the entrance to confirm the location, then walked in. The Peony Room was on the 2nd floor. As the elevator doors opened, laughter spilled out. A warm, slightly boozy, raucous laughter. Someone was yelling for another bottle. Someone else was playfully protesting. The clatter of plates and cutlery formed a kind of carefully orchestrated symphony. I pushed the door open. A round table held over 20 people, packed tightly. Half the dishes were already served: lobster, abalone, coral trout, plates piled high. The drinks were top-shelf whiskey and expensive wine, the bottles already opened. Mark Liu sat at the head of the table, wearing a polo shirt. His watch sparkled in the light. I couldn't tell the brand, but he made sure to show it off every time he reached for his food. The laughter stopped the moment they saw me. Everyone turned. I stood in the doorway. Gray hoodie, old canvas sneakers, messy ponytail, not even a handbag. Mark was the first to react. A smile plastered on his face. Whoa, Sarah Summers, you made it. Come in, come in. He waved me over, then turned to someone beside him. Waiter, bring another chair. Over there. By the window. He said, over there, with a casual, deliberate air. I followed his gaze. The chair was at the far corner of the table, next to the serving station, where waiters streamed in and out with hot dishes. Barely enough room to turn around. It's fine. I'll sit there, I said. I walked over and sat down. The classmate next to me, a woman with big curls, coral lipstick, and a Chanel tweed jacket, edged her chair away, as if afraid I'd dirty her clothes. I recognized her. Vera Lynn, our class's entertainment committee head. Her family was in building materials. She'd worn designer labels even back in high school. Sarah. Long time no see. Vera smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. What are you up to now? Still living on the South Side. She emphasized South Side with a knowing smirk. The South Side was the old part of town, where the shanty town I grew up in was located. I brought a classmate home once during summer break in our senior year, and the next day, everyone knew that Sarah Summers lived in a self-built house with no separate bathroom, in an alley too narrow for two people to walk side by side. Yeah, still there, I said. Vera exchanged a glance with the girl next to her. That was Lily Wong, who'd sat in front of me in class and often piled her books high to block my view. Lily covered her mouth and giggled. Wow, all these years and you haven't moved. Has that area been demolished yet? Not yet. Huh. Well, that's nice. The rent must be cheap over there. Lily took a sip of her wine. Graceful. Not like us now. Housing prices are insane. We just moved into a new 3-bedroom. The mortgage is almost $700 a month. Such a burden. She said such a burden, but her tone was dripping with smugness. Mark chimed in from across the table. Lily, you're still in HR at that tech company. Right. Didn't your company go public this year? Yeah. It's doing okay. I have some stock options. She waved a dismissive hand. It's nothing really. Annual salary plus dividends. Barely breaking $150,000. A chorus of wow. Lily, you're amazing. And so successful. Rippled around the table. Then Mark turned to me. Sarah, what about you? You haven't told us what you do. I remember you were a great student. You must have gone to a good university that he was faking. I'd been accepted to one of the top 10 universities in the country, but I couldn't afford it. I went straight to work after high school. Everyone knew. My name had been on the school's honor roll. Then I dropped out. The news spread through the entire grade. Mark couldn't have forgotten that didn't go to college. I said, started working right after graduation. Mark put on a perfectly timed look of pity. Oh, that's too bad. So what do you do now? I just manage money. Vera snorted. Manage money. Like a bank teller. Or, wait, an insurance saleswoman. She laughed, and a few others joined in. Someone muttered, Sarah's still so quiet. Someone else took a bite of their food. Not looking at me. The room became rowdy again, but it was a high-handed kind of rowdiness, like a group of well-fed people tossing a crust of bread to someone hungry on the curb. Mark stood up, raising his glass. All right, let's make a toast. 12 years, and we're all still together. No matter where we are now, we're still classmates. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine too. The juice in my glass had just been poured by a waiter. People clinked glasses high over the table. No one clinked with me in my corner that I held my glass. Not drinking, just watching them. They laughed loudly, complimenting each other, talking about cars, homes, which international schools their kids attended. Vera said her tweed jacket was a runway piece from Paris Fashion Week. Lily complained about her new home's contractor cutting corners. Mark discussed a private equity fund that had recently performed well with the two guys next to him. Everyone was busy showing off their perfect lives. No one asked, how have you really been these past 12 years? 12 years. This circle hadn't changed at all. After a few rounds of drinks, Mark's face was flushed. Beside him sat Ben Chien, our former sports commissioner. He was now a project manager at a real estate firm. Ben was a little drunk, his speech slurring. Sarah, how'd you get here? Cab. I'll have my driver take you home. My car's a Mercedes S-Class. Super comfortable. You're in the South Side. Right. On my way. He patted my shoulder. A little too hard. We're old friends. Gotta look out for each other. You've had a rough time, haven't you? The way he said it, you've had a rough time, was laden with meaning. Lily nodded in agreement. Yeah. Sarah, don't be shy. Tonight's dinner costs over $100 per person. If that's too steep, I'll cover your share. No problem. She enunciated over $100 per person very clearly. I looked up at her. She looked back at me with a pitying expression, like she was looking at a wet stray cat. No need. I said, I can handle the $75. Don't be so modest. We're all classmates here. I said no need. My voice wasn't loud, but for some reason, the whole table fell silent. Everyone looked at me, like they were watching a mute finally speak. Mark tried to break the tension. All right. Let Sarah handle her own stuff. Come on. Another toast. Wait. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened a file. The light from the screen illuminated my face. Everyone squinted to see it. I heard you talking about a private equity fund earlier. Mark, I said, looking at him. The one that's been doing well. Is it called Creston Capital? Mark hesitated. Yeah, you know it. I know it. I said, Creston Capital invested in 3 projects last year. 2 have already collapsed. The third is being investigated by the SEC. Their managing partner was restricted from leaving the country last month. Mark, how much did you invest? Mark's face changed color. Wah. What are you talking about? I'm not joking. I turned my phone screen to face him. It was a screenshot from the SEC's official website. Clear black text. Notice of remedial action against Creston Capital. Mark stared at the screen for a few seconds. His mouth opened and closed. His face went from red to white. Who said I was a bank teller? I turned to Vera. My voice calm. You said your jacket was a runway piece from Paris Fashion Week. The tweed from this year's spring-summer collection. The label on yours is different from the genuine article stitching. Yours is a fake. Vera's smile froze solid. And you? I said, looking at Lily. Your tech company did go public last year, but the stock price has dropped 40% since the IPO. Those options you have are underwater. They're worthless. Your actual income this year is under $60,000. And your department laid off 30 people last month. You weren't on the list because of your relationship with the HR director, right? Lily's wine glass trembled. She splashed some wine onto the tablecloth. A deep red stain. The peony room fell completely silent. Over 20 people. No one spoke. The central air conditioning hummed. I slowly scanned everyone's faces. Their expressions were like a spilled paint palette. Shock, confusion, fear, disbelief. Then I said something that made them freeze entirely. You asked what I do. I manage money. I manage the money for Summit Capital. Mark, that Creston fund you mentioned. The one whose 2 funds collapsed. The buyer was one of our special purpose funds. I'm here to do due diligence. I didn't expect to find my next case right here at dinner. I put my phone back in my pocket, picked up my glass of juice, and finished it. I set the glass gently back on the table. Thanks for the $75. I smiled. The food was good. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me was a dead silence. Not even the sound of breathing. The door closed softly. The hallway lights were blindingly bright. I leaned against the wall for a few seconds. I noticed my hands were shaking. Not from nerves. It was the ache of something pent up for too long. Finally released. My phone buzzed. Emily's message. Miss Summers, I've sent the investment records you asked for on your classmates to your email. Also, the Creston Capital meeting is at 10 a.m. tomorrow. You'll need to prepare. I replied. Got it at the end of the hallway. The elevator chimed. I walked in and watched the metal door slide shut. As the last sliver of light from the hallway disappeared, I heard the peony room erupt behind me. Loud, chaotic, the sound of crashing glasses and plates. The elevator descended. I looked at my reflection in the mirrored wall. Gray hoodie, old canvas sneakers, no makeup, but something in my eyes had changed, like a spring that had been compressed for too long. Finally released. 12 years. That bitter taste in my mouth was finally completely gone, but I knew this was just the beginning. The Creston Capital mess involved far more people than just Mark Liu. And the look in a few people's eyes at that table, that shift from arrogance to fear to cold, calculating scrutiny, told me this wouldn't end here. The elevator reached the basement level. I walked out. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Sarah Summers. You'd better stop investigating Creston. There are things you can't handle. No signature. I stared at the message for 3 seconds. Then I deleted it. The underground garage was empty. I walked up to a black Porsche and opened the door. The engine's roar echoed through the empty basement. I'll deal with it tomorrow. Chapter 2. Old ghosts. New faces. I barely ate anything at dinner. By the time I got home, my stomach was hollow with hunger. I stopped at the convenience store near my apartment and bought a cup of stewed snacks, eating it in the car before going upstairs. The radish wasn't cooked enough, but the hot broth made me feel better. After a shower, I saw over a dozen unread WhatsApp messages. I didn't open the class group chat. I knew what was being said. Sure enough, a few messages appeared. Sarah, what was that? And that wasn't cool. Mark sent me 3 private messages. The first 2 were, is what you said about Creston true? And can you send me that file? He deleted the third. Vera didn't message me, but she posted a selfie on Instagram with the caption, some people are destined to stay at the bottom. With a smiley face. I didn't reply to anyone. The one message that stopped me was from someone I didn't expect. Claire Chun, our class's academic representative. She never liked to be the center of attention. I hadn't seen her at the reunion, Sarah. It's Claire. I wasn't at the reunion, but I saw Mark's messages in the group. Are you okay? I stared at this message for a long time. Claire was one of the few people in high school who was kind to me. Her family wasn't wealthy, but she was gentle and warm. During the winter of our senior year, I had a fever and missed class. She copied her notes and left them in my desk, with a note that read, "Drink more hot water." We'd lost touch after graduation. I didn't know where she was now. I'm fine. I replied, "Why didn't you come today?" Family stuff. Couldn't get away. But I saw the messages. It seemed intense. Don't take it to heart. That's just how they are. They'll never change. I know. Are you at Summit Capital now? She asked. I paused. How did she know? I saw it in a financial news article. That new energy project fund 3 invested in. The press release mentioned your name. I guessed it was you. She followed with a smiley face. I always knew you'd be successful. I held my phone. Sitting on the couch. The living room was dark, lit only by a floor lamp near the TV stand. That sentence meant more to me than everything from tonight. Thank you, Claire. Really, don't thank me. Listen, there's something I think you should know. When you dropped out after high school, it wasn't that nobody tried to help. Our homeroom teacher, Mr. Wong, tried to get you a scholarship, but you left so quickly. He couldn't reach you. He even went to your house. But your mom said you'd already left for work. My mom. She'd never told me that. And Claire's message continued. You probably don't know this. Back then, someone anonymously put $75 in a reference book they'd lent you. You gave the money back later, but the person who put it there never admitted it was them. Who? I can't say. You'll have to guess. She sent a tongue sticking out emoji. Anyway, that person is doing well now. You might meet them again someday. I put the phone down and leaned back into the couch. Closing my eyes, images flickered in my mind. The wooden desks in the high school classroom. The sycamore tree outside the window that always dropped its leaves. My mother hunched over her sewing machine every night until the early hours. Her silhouette visible from my room. And that $75. I'd assumed my mom had left it in the book. When I asked her, she said she hadn't. I'd never known who it was. I pushed the thought away. There were more important things to deal with tomorrow. But the next day was more complicated than I expected at 10 a.m. In Summit Capital's internal conference room. 8 people sat around the long table. They were members of Fund 3's investment committee. I sat in the middle. Emily was taking notes. The topic, Creston Capital's 2 collapsed funds. The situation is worse than we estimated. Emily said, opening a presentation. Creston sent us an official notice. The 2 funds have a combined loss of $42 million, affecting over 300 investors. They want our special purpose fund to cover some of the priority payment liability. But the problem is, the due diligence report we had when we took over the fund didn't mention these risks at all. A heavy silence filled the room. The colleague responsible for that due diligence report was Kevin Zhao. He was someone I'd mentored. He looked pale, adjusting his glasses nervously. Ms. Summers, the data I was given didn't show any of this. The financials Creston provided. Up to which quarter? Through the 3rd quarter of last year. That's enough. I cut him off. There was a 6-month gap between the 3rd quarter and the 1st quarter of this year. The underlying assets had already defaulted 3 times. Creston didn't disclose it, and you didn't investigate it. That's a major due diligence failure. Kevin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. But this isn't entirely on you, I said, softening my tone. Creston deliberately hid things. There were also gaps in our internal process. The question now is how to minimize the damage. Ms. Summers, what do you mean? Another member asked. Who knows Nathan Rhodes? Creston's actual controller. I looked around the table. The members exchanged glances. A senior colleague at the end of the table. Mr. Sunday had been with the firm for 15 years. He spoke slowly. I've heard of Rhodes. He started in the gray market, then went legit and entered the private equity space. He has connections. Someone in the city government. Miss Summers, if we go head-to-head with him, I'm not going head-to-head. I said, I got a tip from a high school reunion last night. The biggest underlying asset in those 2 Creston funds is a commercial real estate project. The developer is a real estate company based in a neighboring town called Jincheng. The CEO of that company. His last name is Qian. He was in my high school class. The room exchanged puzzled looks. Ben Qian. I said, last night. He was driving his Mercedes S-Class, offering me a ride home. What a coincidence. I asked Emily to pull the complete file on that real estate project. 20 minutes later, I had it. The company's name, Grand Vision Realty. 3 years ago, they bought a plot of land in Jincheng to build a commercial complex. It was in a bad location. Leasing was a disaster, and the cash flow had been stretched thin for a while. Creston Capital used this project to create an asset-backed security, packaged as wealth management products sold to investors. The project failed. Ben couldn't escape responsibility. Neither could Creston, but Ben had been at the reunion, smugly showing off his Mercedes. I need to meet with Ben Chien. I said, Emily, set it up. This afternoon. Emily nodded and left. After the meeting, Kevin stayed behind. He came to my desk, his voice low. Miss Summers, I'm sorry. The due diligence oversight was my fault. I'll take responsibility. We'll discuss responsibility later. First, we fix the hole. I looked at him. Kevin, you've been with me for 2 years. I know your capabilities. After this is over, write a review. Improve the process. Don't overthink it. He nodded gratefully and left. I sat alone in the conference room, staring at the Grand Vision Realty documents projected on the screen. The company was registered in Jincheng, with Ben's father as the legal representative. But Ben was the real operator. A photo was included from a business forum he'd spoken at last year. Dressed sharp, looking proud. The same guy who'd patted my shoulder and said you've had a rough time at 3 p.m. Ben's response came back. He was willing to meet, but he chose the location. The Royal Imperial, the Peony Room. We were just there. Like old times. I smirked. He was choosing the venue to regain some face. Or because he felt more secure on his home turf. Fine. I replied. On the way to the Royal Imperial, Emily was driving. I was in the back, reviewing documents. She glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Miss Summers. I looked into Ben Chien. He's under a lot of financial pressure. The Grand Vision complex has been shut down for 3 months. Logically, he should be begging us for help. But he chose to meet at the Royal Imperial. That's unusual. He still thinks I'm the same Sarah Summers from last night. I said, just wait. By the time we got to the hotel, it was drizzling. I walked through the lobby with a black umbrella, past that giant icicle-like chandelier. The Peony Room's door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Ben was already inside, sitting at the same table we'd all shared. A pot of tea sat before him. He stood up when he saw me, his smile more subdued than last night. There was still a trace of arrogance, but it was muted. Sarah's here. Sit down. I sat. He poured me a cup of tea and pushed it toward me, tapping the table twice with his finger. About last night. Don't take it to heart. Everyone had a few too many. They say stupid things when they're drunk. He smiled. Anyway, Mark later told me you're at Summit Capital. That's great. Sarah, you've done well. Why didn't you say so? You didn't ask. His smile faltered, then recovered. Huh. Right. Okay, let's get down to business. You know about Creston? Yes. Grand Vision's cash flow has hit a snag. The project has debt problems. Creston used our project for financing. Now the products are collapsing, and investors are knocking on our door. We're the project developer. We can't escape responsibility. Ben's smile faded. He took a sip of tea and set the cup down. His gaze turned serious. Sarah, we're old classmates. I'll be straight with you. The Grand Vision project has some issues, but I can turn it around. I just need a bridge loan. 3 months. Interest is negotiable. How much? $10 million. I stared at him without a word. He started to look uncomfortable, but held his ground. I know you manage money at Summit. A sum like this is nothing for you. We're old friends. If you help me out, I can make it worth your while. Ben, I interrupted. Do you think I'm that easy to deal with? He blinked. A $10 million bridge loan. Is Grand Vision Realty even worth $10 million right now? You know the answer. And your debt-to-equity ratio is over 300%. That money would be a black hole. If I help you, and the investors sue, I'll not only lose my job, I could go to jail. Do you think I'd do that? Ben's face finally changed. His lips moved, like he was about to lose his temper. Then he reined it in. Then why are you here? Tio tell you something? I looked at him. The investors behind Creston's 2 failed funds are already organizing a class action lawsuit. You're the actual project operator. By law, you have joint liability, and the Grand Vision Company accounts have already been frozen. Isn't that right? Ben's face drained of color. How do you know that? I know a lot more than you think. I said, last night, at the reunion, you said, you've had a rough time. I'm returning the sentiment to you now. You're about to have a rough time. In addition to the lawsuits, you'll also face a tax audit and a business investigation. That Mercedes S-Class, you might have to sell it to pay off your debts. Ben shot to his feet. His chair scraped loudly. Sarah Summers, don't go too far. Who do you think you are? You were just a poor girl who couldn't even afford college. You think a few years of climbing makes you a queen? I haven't forgotten who I am. I stood up too, my voice calm but firm. The question is, Do you remember those 3 years of high school when you threw trash into my desk? When you called me beggar in front of everyone? When you used my school jacket to wipe your shoes? Ben's face went from white to red. Then from red to purple. I can forget about all that. I said, but I won't ignore the Creston accounts. You came to me for a loan. I won't give you one, but I'll offer you a choice. Cooperate voluntarily with the investor liquidation. Report all of Grand Vision's remaining assets accurately. If you cooperate, the court might go easy on you. If you don't, you'll face forced liquidation. Your choice. Ben stood there, his chest heaving. His fists were clenched, his knuckles white. He stared at me for a long time. Like a cornered animal. I turned and walked away. At the door, I paused. I didn't look back. Oh, and that $75 in the reference book in high school. Was it you? Ben didn't answer. Last night. You said you'd drive me home in your S-Class. I said, as I opened the door. I was going to say, I drive a Porsche. The door closed behind me. I heard something crash to the floor inside. Probably a teacup. The hallway was quiet. The rain was audible from outside. I stood in front of the closed peony room door and glanced at my phone. Emily had sent a message. Miss Summers, Nathan Rhodes sent word. He wants to meet you. Alone. Below it was an address. West Side. Golden Crest Mansion. Building 12. I knew that place. It was one of the most exclusive private clubs in the city. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary villa. But inside, it operated under a different set of rules. Nathan Rhodes, the man controlling Creston. The man behind Ben. He was waiting for me there. Chapter 3. The man on the precipice. Building 12. Golden Crest Mansion was tucked at the end of a lane shaded by plane trees. I had Emily drop me off 2 blocks away and walk the rest. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. Plane leaves carpeted the path, crunching under my feet. The place looked like an ordinary house in a wealthy neighborhood. No sign, just a small brass plate beside the iron gate. Engraved with the number 12. I rang the doorbell. A male voice came through the intercom. Miss Summers, please come in. The gate swung open, revealing a bluestone path lined with bamboo. At the end was a courtyard, facing a floor-to-ceiling glass door. A man in a black suit, maybe 50, stood there. He had a lean face and calm eyes, but his gaze was fixed, like 2 glass marbles. Nathan Rhodes. Ms. Summers, I've heard a lot about you. He stepped aside. Please, come in. The interior wasn't like a club at all. It was someone's private residence. Redwood furniture, calligraphy on the walls. A bronze incense burner in the corner released a subtle sandalwood scent. He led me to a tea table and prepared a pot of tea. He poured me a cup, but didn't drink his. He leaned back in his armchair and studied me. Ben told me you two didn't get along. He said, you have quick sources. He's my man. Rhodes smiled. He came straight to me after you talked. Miss Summers, you've dug deep into the Creston affair. I respect that, but have you considered what you'll get out of it? Justice for the investors. Rhodes nodded, as if expecting that answer. You're a principled person. I can see that. But in this world, principles can be expensive. A big firm like Summit Capital. And you're just a managing partner. Why risk your career for a bad debt from years ago? He pulled out a file from under the tea table and placed it in front of me. Open it. I looked at him. I opened the file. Inside were a few pages. The top document was a scanned copy of a confidentiality agreement. The signature block had my name and a date. 5 years ago, when I joined Summit Capital. But there was another page I'd never seen before. An addendum. It read, Summit Capital participated in a special asset disposition 6 years ago, involving a mining company called Huaxing. The transaction involved the acquisition of a distressed debt portfolio, followed by a series of related party transactions that diverted some of the profits to a third party. The last page was signed by 3 people. The then chairman of the investment committee, the legal counsel, and me. But I never signed this. You don't remember, do you? Rhodes said slowly. When you joined 5 years ago, that page was mixed in with the stack of documents you signed. You didn't read it carefully. That's normal for new hires. A 20-page contract. Who reads every word? I stared at the addendum, my mind racing. I had signed a lot of documents 5 years ago. HR forms, confidentiality, non-compete, compliance. At least 20 pages. I'd skimmed them, but I hadn't read every clause. Who is this third party? I asked. Who do you think? Rhodes smiled, not denying it. Part of the profits from that asset disposition ended up in Creston's accounts. Miss Summers, you think you're just here to audit a bad debt, but you've stepped into a situation you're already a part of. If you blow the lid off Creston, Summit will also be exposed. The document you signed is the evidence that he took a sip of tea, looking relaxed. My suggestion, let this go. I can slowly cover the Creston money. Keep the investors from going to the SEC. Give me 3 months. I'll clean it up. You go back to being a managing partner. We'll be fine. I stared at the file on the table. The sandalwood smoke curled upward. The room was so quiet I could hear the water gently boiling in the teapot. Mr. Rhodes, I said, if you'd said this to me before last night's reunion, I might have hesitated, but I sat at that table for 2 hours. Do you know what I saw? He raised an eyebrow. I saw a group of people who thought they were standing on top of the world, looking down at others with condescending pity. They thought I was struggling, so they generously offered me a little kindness, then went back to their comfortable lives, feeling good about themselves. 12 years. And they haven't changed. They see nothing but money, status, and face. They don't see people. I stood up. I signed that addendum, but it was under false pretenses. Legally, it's not my true intent. I don't accept it. And you're right. If I take down Creston, Summit will be implicated. But you forgot one thing. Mr. Rhodes, I'm a managing partner at Summit. I have full access to the risk control system. I can launch an internal investigation, trace that addendum from the ground up, and clear my own name. The card you're holding will be useless before you can play it. Rhodes' smile faded. He put his cup down, his hand still hovering over the rim. What's your plan? Point 3 options. I said. Option 1. You cooperate with the liquidation. I'll help communicate with the investors. You'll get a lighter sentence. Option 2. You don't cooperate. I go public. The SEC and the DOJ will investigate. You'll get a longer sentence. Option 3. I looked at him. You try to move against me. I came alone today because I'm not afraid of your tricks. You can do whatever you want. But before you do, I'll send all the evidence to 3 different channels. And you, Nathan Rhodes, have more than just the Creston deal to worry about. Rhodes was silent for a long time. The bamboo leaves rustled outside, like rain falling again. Then, slowly, he clapped his hands twice. Sarah Summers, you're more formidable than I thought. I've just been walking on the edge of a cliff my whole life. I said, you coming? Rhodes looked at me. His marble-like eyes shifted. Something in them softened. He looked down, refilled his own teacup, took a sip, and then said something I didn't expect. That's $75. Ben wasn't the one who put it there. I froze. The year you graduated, I was asked to give a sum of money to your family. For an emergency. $750. It wasn't from Ben. Who was it? Rhodes looked at me, as if weighing his options. Then he shook his head. I can't say. You'll find out on your own. That person is connected to the same thing you're investigating. The bamboo rustled again. He stood up to walk me out. At the door, he paused. He didn't turn around. Ms. Summers, some debts aren't meant to be calculated. They're meant to be repaid. After you've settled this score, have you ever wondered why you never got to go to college? I stopped at the door. Your mother pulled you out of school. What reason did she give the school that I'd never asked? My mom said it was family issues. I'd always assumed it was money. Go ask your mother. He closed the door behind me. The iron gate slammed shut with a hollow thud. I stood under the plane tree. The sky had darkened. Streetlights reflected on the wet pavement like shards of a broken mirror. A cold wind blew. I shoved my hands into the pockets of my hoodie and realized my fingers were ice cold. Rhodes' last words echoed in my mind. What reason did she give the school? I pulled out my phone and called my mom. She answered on the 4th ring. Sarah, what's wrong? Did you eat? I ate. Mom, I need to ask you something. What is it? So serious, senior year. Why did you make me drop out? What did you mean by family issues? The phone went silent for a long time. I thought the call had dropped. Why? Why are you asking about that now? Her voice tightened. Mom, tell me the truth. Another silence. Then her voice, quiet and trembling, like a secret finally unearthed. Sarah, I didn't want to hide it from you. It wasn't about money. Someone came to see me. They said you'd offended someone at school. If you stayed, you'd be in trouble. Who? Your desk mate. Senior year. Brian Wong. I remembered. Brian Wong. He'd sat next to me for a year and a half. Quiet. Average grades. Liked to read martial arts novels under his desk. He transferred out at the end of our senior year, and I never heard from him again. What about him? His father. My mom's voice trembled. His father was an important official back then. He said, Brian had been beaten up by someone. The person who did it had connections. It was a big deal. Brian's father investigated. But it led back to you. I never hit anyone. I know you didn't. But the day I came to get you from school, someone left a letter on my desk. Inside was a photo of you and Brian at your desk. There was a utility knife on your desk, and it had a little red mark on it. I froze. I did have a utility knife. For sharpening pencils. The red mark was red watercolor paint from an art class. Mom, I know you wouldn't do that. Sarah, but the person who left the photo said if you stayed at school, the parents of the boy who was hurt would come after you. I was scared. I only have one daughter. I didn't finish school, but I couldn't let anything happen to you. So I told you it was family issues. I made you quit. I leaned against the plane tree. The cold from the bark seeped through my thin hoodie. Brian Wong. Why did he transfer? Who hit him? Who left that photo on my mom's desk? And how did Nathan Rhodes know about the $75? Mom. I interrupted her. Do you know where Brian Wong is now? She paused. I heard his father was transferred. They moved out of town. I don't know where. I hung up. I stood under the streetlight. A light rain began to fall, pattering on the plane leaves. Brian Wong, the quiet boy who lent me his notes, never talked much, but always shielded me from the sun through the window. My only friend in senior year. On the morning he transferred, he'd left a reference book in my desk, the one with the $75. He didn't say anything, just walked away. I'd chased him to the school gate. He looked back and smiled. I'd never understood that smile. Now I thought I did. My phone buzzed. It was Emily. Miss Summers. I made progress on that old Huaxin mining file. That addendum was signed 6 years ago, along with you, the chairman, and the legal counsel. There was one more name on the signature page. It was redacted. I was able to enhance the image. The redacted name is. A name appeared on my screen. Jonathan Wong. Jonathan Wong. Brian Wong's father. I stood in the rain, holding my phone. Raindrops blurred the screen into a patch of light. That net had been cast 12 years ago, and I'd been standing in the center of it the whole time. Chapter 4. The web eye was soaked by the time I got home. My hoodie clung to my skin, cold and tight. I couldn't feel the chill. My mind was too full. After a hot shower, I sat on the couch in a towel, my brain replaying everything. Thread 1. Creston Capital. Nathan Rhodes. Ben Qian. The failed Grand Vision project. The collapsed funds. Thread 2. Huaxin mining. The addendum. My forged signature. Jonathan Wong's name. Thread 3. High school. Brian was beaten. The photo. The $75. All three threads converged on the same time. The spring of my senior year. And at their intersection was something I still couldn't see. I scrolled through my contacts and found a name I hadn't used in years. Chris Zhao. He was the only other person from our class I could still talk to. His family had connections in the education department. I sent him a message. Chris, do you know what happened to Brian Wong? Where is he now? A few minutes later, he replied. Brian Wong. I remember. He transferred out at the end of our senior year. I think his dad was transferred to the state capital. Last I heard, he went to law school. Maybe he's at a law firm now. Why the sudden interest? Just curious. He left so suddenly. Without saying goodbye. You two were desk mates, weren't you? Didn't you ask? No. Oh. By the way, I remember just before he left, there was an incident. Someone put a threatening note in his desk. It said, tell your family to keep quiet, or else. It was a big deal. The principal even had a class meeting about it. No one found out who did it. Threatening note. I put my phone down and sat on the couch for a long time. Brian had been beaten. He received a threatening note. He transferred. Then someone put a photo on my mom's desk. Then I was forced to drop out. Tell your family to keep quiet. Not, or else. Tell your family to keep quiet. Brian knew something. He'd been silenced. The next morning, I went to the office. I called Emily in. Find someone for me. Jonathan Wong. He was a department head in the city government. He's connected to the Huaxin mining asset disposition. His son is Brian Wong. We were in high school together. Find out where he is and what he's doing now. Emily scribbled notes. At the door, she turned back. Miss Summers. About Nathan Rhodes. Did he threaten you? Not yet. But he gave me another lead. I looked at her. Emily, in your 3 years here, have you noticed any projects with unusual decision-making paths? Ones that went through a lot of affiliates? She paused. She set her notepad down and was quiet for a moment. Miss Summers, there is something I've been meaning to tell you. Go on. The year before you joined, the firm did a big restructuring. The investment committee chairman, the general counsel, and a few senior investment managers all left within the same month. Officially, it was a strategic adjustment. But during my onboarding, an old-timer mentioned that those people signed heavy NDAs and got big severance packages because they'd touched something they shouldn't have. He didn't elaborate, but he hinted that if anyone ever dug up the Huaxin deal, everyone currently at Summit would be implicated. I leaned back, staring at the fluorescent ceiling lights. Huaxin. Again. That addendum was like a steel beam hidden in a load-bearing wall. Invisible until you disturbed it. I'll find Jonathan Wong as quickly as possible. Emily left. I sat alone. The weather was gloomy. The glass was streaked with rain. I looked at my phone, thinking about the anonymous text from last night. Sarah Summers, you'd better stop investigating Creston. There are things you can't handle. I deleted it. But now I wondered if that text wasn't from Rhodes at all. Who was it from? At 11 a.m. Emily returned. Her face was grim. Miss Summers, Jonathan Wong's situation is complicated. Tell me. Jonathan Wong was transferred from the city government to a state-level department 6 years ago. But he only stayed for less than a year before he retired. No public reason. Officially, it was personal reasons. But I asked around. Someone filed an anonymous complaint against him, accusing him of favoritism in approving projects, specifically related to a loan for Huaxin mining. The complaint claimed he'd relaxed the approval standards for the loan, and Huaxin defaulted within 6 months. Huaxin. Again. Where is he now? He moved to a neighboring city after retiring. He lives with his son. His son, Brian Wong, is now a partner at a law firm. Which firm? Emily looked at her notes. Sagewood Associates. Sagewood. I knew the name. One of the largest firms in the state, specializing in financial litigation and asset restructuring. Brian was a partner in his early 30s. That meant he was good. Can you reach him? I'll try. Emily left to make calls. I stood by the window. The rain was getting heavier. 12 years. What had he become? Would he remember me? Half an hour later, Emily returned. Miss Summers. Brian Wong replied. He's free tonight. He wants to meet. He chose the location. A tea house called Phoenix Tree on the south side. The south side. My old neighborhood. He chose the place I grew up. Tell him I'll be there. Before I left, I stood in my office for a moment. My phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Sarah, don't overthink what I said yesterday. It's all in the past. Are you coming home for dinner? I stared at the words for a long time. Finally, I replied, not tonight. Another day. I put my phone in my pocket, grabbed my jacket, and walked out. The Phoenix Tree Tea House was in a narrow lane on the south side. The storefront was small, with a wooden sign that had faded lettering. I pushed the door open. The smell of aged wood greeted me. Inside were a few old square tables. In the corner sat a man in a dark blue shirt. He looked up when the door creaked. Brian Wong. He was thinner than he'd been in high school, but his features were the same. That boy who used to read novels under his desk now wore a well-tailored shirt with sleeves rolled up, a simple watch on his wrist. His gaze was calm, appraising. Sarah. He stood up. It's been a long time. Long time. He waited for me to sit, then poured me a cup of tea, roasted barley tea, in a coarse ceramic cup, the same kind from the stalls on the south side. He remembered. I was surprised when your assistant called. He said, smiling. How are you? I'm okay. You? Fine. Being a lawyer. Lots of paperwork. Not that interesting. But it pays the bills. A few seconds of silence. The air smelled of roasted barley. Outside, the occasional scooter splashed through the wet street. We'd been apart for years. There were so many things left unsaid. I didn't know where to start. Brian spoke first. You're here because of Huaxin, aren't you? I looked up. How did you know? Because I've been waiting for this day. He set down his cup and folded his hands on the table. Sarah. There's something I never got to explain. Explain what? The threatening letter. The beating. You dropping out. His gaze was steady. I know you know some of it. But you should know all of it. Because my father told me everything. He took a deep breath. Senior year. I found a document in my father's study. A loan approval for Huaxin mining. My father was one of the signatories. But the numbers didn't add up. The projected cash flow was inflated by 3 times. The collateral was overvalued. I didn't understand finance back then. But I knew what numbers looked like. I told a friend. That friend was the son of another classmate's father. That man tried to use the information to bring my father down, to put his own man in the position, but it didn't work. My father was untouchable because he had a backer. So that man changed his target. To me. Brian's voice was flat, like he was telling someone else's story. He hired some people to jump me after school. I didn't get hurt badly, but they had a message. Tell your father to mind his own business. And the threatening note. The note wasn't from my father's political rival. Brian nodded. It was from someone else. Someone who didn't want the whole thing to blow up. Because it would implicate more than just my father. They wanted it to go away quietly. So I transferred. My father was transferred. We moved away. Then why the book? The $75. I asked. Brian looked down at his cup. Because I felt guilty. After I left, I knew they'd take it out on you. He looked up. And they did. The photo. The utility knife. They went to your mother's office. They forced you to drop out because you were close to me. They were afraid you knew something. But I didn't know anything. I know you didn't. He looked up. But I couldn't come back to help you. My father was in trouble himself. All I could do was put a little money in that book. It was all my saved allowance. I hoped you'd use it to get by. I returned it. I didn't know it was from you. I knew you would. He smiled, a thin glimmer in his eyes. That's just who you are. You never take what you don't owe. The rain was beating against the window. An old floor clock chimed 6 times. A muffled and distant sound. Sarah, he said, the thing you're investigating now is the same net my father investigated all those years ago. Washing Mining, Creston Capital, Grand Vision, Summit Capital. They look unrelated, but they have one common controller. My father was protected by that person, then forced out by that person. Who? Brian looked at me. His lips barely moved. He said one word. Rhodes. Rhodes is the center of the web. I gripped my cup. He's the front man. The deeper roots are underground. But if you want to tear the web down, he's the first one you have to take out. The rain was getting louder. I sat there, the warmth from the cup slowly fading. Nathan Rhodes. He'd shared a pot of tea with me at Golden Crest Mansion. He'd said, some debts are meant to be repaid. The way he said it, so calm, like he knew I'd reached this point. He wasn't warning me. He was waiting for me. Brian. I said, will you help me? I need a full legal review of the Huaxin deal. I need your firm's expertise. Will you help me? He looked at me. After a moment, he said, I've been waiting 12 years for this. He reached out his hand. I took it. It was steady as the day he'd slipped that book into my desk. Chapter 5. The Father's Shadow. Brian's firm moved quickly. 3 days later, he sent me an 80-page assessment report. I stayed up all night reading it. The more I read, the colder I got. The conclusion was clear. The Huaxin asset disposition 6 years ago was, on paper, a debt acquisition, but in reality, it was a classic related party transaction, a shell game. Summit Capital had bought Huaxin's distressed debt at 30% below market value, then funneled the best assets through a series of shell companies to Creston Capital, which repackaged them into wealth management products. The profits flowed back to the private accounts of a certain Summit executive. That executive had been the investment committee chairman. After he left, his name was replaced with a code. P. Who was P? The report didn't say, but Brian had a note. I traced the electronic signature trail. In addition to the chairman and the general counsel, there was a digital signature with no named signatory, just an IP address. The IP belonged to the city's finance department. The finance department. The same department where Jonathan Wong had worked. Brian. I called him. Can you trace that IP to a specific office or terminal? I did. The office was on the 3rd floor of the old finance building. It was used by a temporary task force called Regional Financial Risk Assessment. It was under the finance department's banner. But the people were borrowed from other agencies. Borrowed by whom? I'm still checking. But the head of that task force was a Director Liu. Full name. Henry Liu. Henry Liu. The name hit me like a jolt. I remembered it. When I'd met with Ben at the Royal Imperial, he'd mentioned that the real money behind Grand Vision wasn't Creston. Creston was just the middleman. The actual investor was a man named Liu. A man who had once been a director in the finance department, who had run that temporary task force, and whose IP address was embedded in the forged addendum at Summit Capital. The map was lighting up in my mind. Henry Liu was P. The link between Summit, Huaxin, and Creston. And Nathan Rhodes was his front man.ms. Summers. There's one more thing, Brian said, after Henry Liu left the finance department. His movements have been hard to track, but I found a company registered in his wife's name, a shelf company in Florida. It owns 15% of Creston Capital. 15%. Just enough for a board seat, but not enough to be a target. I put the phone down and looked out the window. It was dark. The lights of the financial center gleamed like pearls strung in the sky. I thought of Nathan Rhodes' words. Your mother pulled you out of school. What reason did she give? Henry Liu. At the time of my father's death and my forced withdrawal, he was running a risk assessment task force. What was he assessing? Who was he assessing? I called my mom. She answered quickly, as if she'd been waiting. Mom, I need to ask you about someone. Henry Liu. Do you know him? The line went silent. Then she said, how do you know that name, Mom? I need the truth. Who put that photo on your desk? Sarah. Mom. A long silence. Then I heard her sniffle, soft and controlled. She was crying. Henry Liu had it delivered. She said, the day you were pulled out of school, he sent me a letter saying, your daughter has been spending too much time with the Wong boy. The Wong family is involved in something. If you want your daughter safe, take her away. Don't ask why. Don't tell anyone. Why would he care about my life? Because he owed your father a favor. I froze. Dad, your father helped him. When they were young. When Henry was starting out. He was struggling. Your dad gave him $200. Henry eventually rose high, but he never forgot that. He said your father's debt was his debt. So he made me drop out to protect me. That's what he said. Sarah, I didn't know anything else. All I knew was that you were Brian's deskmate, and the Wongs were being targeted. Henry said if you stayed, you'd be caught in the crossfire. I had no other choice. I believed him. The call ended. I sat in my chair for a long time. My father, a man whose face was so faint in my memory, it was just a silhouette. He died when I was in elementary school. He left behind a single black and white photo, a few notebooks, and a tangle of old debts I'd never understand. He'd lent $200 to a man who used that debt to decide my fate. And I'd never even known that I found my father's old notebooks. A blue softcover. It was filled with accounts, price of rice, electricity bills, gifts given and received. On the last page, a few lines were written in a heavier hand. Henry said he was in trouble and needed help. I had $200. I gave it to him. He said he'd pay me back. I don't expect the money back. I just hope he doesn't do anything bad. Below that, in scrawled handwriting, a later entry. But then he did something bad. I couldn't stop him. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest. The rough paper felt like my father's hands. The next morning, I met Henry Liu. He agreed quickly. He chose a modest tea shop in the city center, not the lavish Golden Crest mansion, a neighborhood place that had been around for decades. I arrived to find him sitting by the window. He was in his 60s, his hair completely white, wearing a worn gray jacket, slowly turning 2 walnuts in his hands. The moment I saw him, I realized that while Nathan Rhodes had the same demeanor and played the same role, Rhodes had ambition in his eyes. Henry Liu only had fatigue. Sit. He gestured to the seat across from him. You have your father's eyes. The shape that I sat down. Mr. Liu, I'm here for one thing. Did you authorize the Huaxin asset disposition 6 years ago? He stopped turning the walnuts. He looked out the window for a long moment. Then, yes. I clicked approve on the electronic signature. Did you know the addendum was forged? Yes. Did you know I was named on it without my knowledge? Yes. Then why didn't you stop it? Henry set the walnuts down and turned to look at me. His eyes were cloudy, like looking through fog. Because I owed your father a debt. When he gave me that money, I never thought I'd repay it. I climbed up. I could have repaid him. But he said, just do your job well. That's how you repay me. But I didn't do my job well. I did bad things. Your father came to me once. Said, Henry, if you keep going down this road, you won't be able to turn back. But I was already too far gone. He looked down at the chipped teacup. The Huaxin deal wasn't my idea. I was just a figurehead. The one running the show used my credentials and permissions. He had more connections and more ruthlessness. Later, I found out the addendum had a new page with your name on it. But you say you didn't sign it. And I believe you. Because the original addendum didn't have you. Someone pasted your signature onto it. Who? Henry Liu looked up. His lips moved, as if he'd been bracing himself to say this name for a long time. You guessed it. Nathan Rhodes. But Rhodes isn't the one pulling the final strings. The assets from Huaxin didn't end up at Creston. Creston was just a waypoint. The money ultimately ended up somewhere you'd never expect. He pulled a photo from his pocket and placed it on the table. I picked it up. It was a picture of an old brick building covered in ivy. The sycamore tree in front was much thicker than I remembered. The south side, the building where I'd grown up, some of that money ended up in a Southside redevelopment fund. Henry said, your old house was demolished in that redevelopment. The compensation you received was higher than the market rate. That difference came from the Huaxin asset proceeds. My fingers tightened on the photo. The $200 your father gave me. It came back to you, through a 20-year detour, in the form of that redevelopment money. Henry looked at me, a faint ember of light in his cloudy eyes. Your father never knew. I did it for him, to repay him. That deal with Huaxin was illegal, but everything I did, making you drop out, making Brian transfer, routing that money, all of it was to settle your father's debt. He stood up and put the walnuts in his pocket. Sarah Summers, you've connected all the dots. What you do next is your choice. I have only one request. Don't let your mother find out. She's had a hard life. Let her rest. He walked away. The tea remained untouched. I sat by the window, holding the photo. Sunlight fell on it, warming the old building, the house where I grew up, where I jumped rope, did homework, waited for my mom to come home. It was gone now, but in the photo, it was still there. Red bricks, ivy, a sycamore tree. Some things are demolished, but the accounts remained. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, was a handwritten note. To Frank, I owe you this. Henry. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. I called Brian and told him everything. A long silence followed. Then he said, Sarah, you know what this means, right? Everyone on this chain, Rhodes, Lou, the Summit Old Guard, they're all implicated. If you sue, they all go down. I know. Even the addendum with your forged signature. I know. Then why keep going? I stood at the window of my office, watching the traffic below. The headlights were like a river of light, never stopping, because that chain was forged 12 years ago. It entangled me. It entangled you. It entangled the $200 my father lent. If I don't break it, it'll entangle someone else in another 12 years. Brian was silent for a moment. Then he said, I'll help you. Over the next week, with Brian's help, I made my moves. First, I initiated an internal risk control audit at Summit. I retrieved the original Huaxin transaction files. The addendum page with my signature was clearly different in paper grain, print quality, and PDF timestamp. Brian's firm provided a forensic analysis confirming the page was pasted in. Then, Emily traced the money flow from the Huaxin disposition, through Creston, through 3 shell companies, and finally into the Southside Redevelopment Fund. The trail was clear. Every transaction was documented. Finally, I contacted one of the original creditors from the Huaxin deal. The company's owner was bankrupt, but he'd kept screenshots of old emails showing the demand to overvalue the collateral with the evidence assembled. I sent a message to Nathan Rhodes. I'm giving you 3 days. Cooperate with the regulatory authorities and work with the liquidation, or I go public. He replied, You're impressive, but this game isn't just yours to play. The next morning, an unexpected visitor appeared at my office door. Kevin Zhao, the young man who'd botched the due diligence. He stood before me, pale and exhausted, holding a USB drive. Ms. Summers, you need to see this. What is it? I got an anonymous email last night. A file, encrypted. I cracked it. It's a full record of all financial transfers between Creston and Huaxin, from 6 years ago to the present. Complete. I plugged in the drive. It was an Excel spreadsheet with tens of thousands of rows. Each line recorded where funds came from, where they went, and who handled them. Most of it ended in the Southside Redevelopment Fund, as expected, but there was a flow I hadn't seen before. A stream of money was going to a personal account. The account holder's name, Linda Rhodes, Nathan Rhodes' sister. Ms. Summers. I looked her up. Kevin said, his face even paler. She's Nathan Rhodes' sister. She has no direct connection to Creston. The money was listed as consulting fees. The payee was Sagewood Associates. Brian's firm. I leaned back. Nathan was paying his sister, and his sister was paying Brian's firm. Why? Kevin, have you told anyone else about this? No. I came straight to you. You did the right thing. Keep this quiet. He nodded and left. I called Brian. Linda Rhodes is your client. A pause on the other end. How did you know? Never mind how I know. What's she hiring you for? Brian sighed. Sarah, I was going to tell you later. Linda approached me as a representative of some small investors affected by the Creston collapse. They wanted us to do the pre-litigation work. I've been getting paid through her. She's Nathan's sister, but she's helping to take him down. She said it was her own choice. She didn't want to cover for him anymore. I put the phone down and looked out the window. It was evening. The glass facades were beginning to reflect the neon lights. Nathan Rhodes' own sister had given us the knife. Why? I thought of the way Nathan had served me tea at the mansion. Steady hands, even voice, calculating. But had he calculated that his own sister would turn on him? I opened the Excel file again. At the very bottom of the money trail, one final transaction caught my eye. A transfer, 5 days ago. An amount, $1.000. The recipient's account was under a name I knew all too well, Marion Summers. My mom. I went completely still. $1,000. 5 days ago. My mom. I called her. Mom, did you get a bank transfer recently? $1,000. A short pause. How did you know? A few days ago, I received a letter from the school saying the alumni fund had made a repayment for a scholarship from your father's time. I didn't think much of it, Mom. Don't touch that money. Who sent it? A man named Lou. He said he was your father's old colleague. He said the school had returned a donation your father made years ago. Henry Lou. Again, he sent money to my mom at this exact moment. Why? To protect me. To buy my silence. Or for some other reason. I hung up and paced the room. The night skyline was ablaze. In my mind, the pieces spun like a kaleidoscope. Nathan Rhodes, Henry Lou, Ben, Brian, Jonathan, my father, my mom, Linda Rhodes. Everyone had a place on that chain. And at the end was a quiet, $1,000 deposit into my mother's account. Henry Lou was trying to settle an old debt. In his way, Nathan was trying to close the lid. In his, Linda was trying to expose everything. In hers, and I had to find my way to break every single one of those threads that I sat down at my computer and opened the full evidence file. I began writing an email.to the SEC, the State Attorney General, the Summit Capital Board, and all major financial media outlets. Subject: formal complaint and evidence regarding related party transactions and illegal capital flow involving Huaxin Mining / Creston Capital / Summit Capital. That I typed the first line with steady hands. I wrote the last line and added a single clause. I, Sarah Summers, as a related party to the above events, voluntarily accept full legal responsibility for the content of this report. That I hit send. A soft chime echoed in the silence. Then I messaged Nathan Rhodes. The email is sent. Your move. Half a minute later, he replied. Received. Another half minute. That money to your mother was sent on my orders. It's not a payoff. It's a payment. Your father's $200. With 22 years of interest. $1,000. Now we're even. I stared at the screen. I didn't know how to feel. Outside, the city hummed its oblivious nightly tune. No one knew that tonight. An email was traveling across the networks to places that could bring a whole system down. I put the phone down and leaned back. I was exhausted, but a part of me, the part that had been locked for 12 years, had finally eased just a little. Chapter 7. Closing the net. I didn't sleep that night. At 2 a.m. I got the first reply, an auto response from the SEC's office. Your submission has been received and will be forwarded to the appropriate department. At 4 a.m. Emily messaged me. Miss Summers, the financial press is already calling. They're asking about Summit. At 6 a.m. A single question mark appeared in the Summit Capital Partner Group chat, followed by a screenshot from a financial news website. Exclusive. Summit Capital implicated in irregular related party deal. Creston Capital collapse may uncover more. I didn't reply. At 7 a.m. I was in the office. 17 missed calls on my phone. I didn't answer any of them. At 8:30 a.m. Brian called. The SEC is already in touch. They're asking for supplementary materials. Sarah, are you ready? I'm ready. You'll be asked to testify. The Summit Board will take action. Can you handle it? I can handle it. A pause. Then we'll go all the way. I poured myself a glass of cold water and stood by the window, taking a sip. Below, reporters were setting up cameras in front of the financial center. They looked like tiny ants. My phone was still vibrating. I didn't look. I knew who it was. Mark, Vera, Lily, Ben, and others who'd sent messages yesterday asking what's going on with Sarah. They probably understood now what I'd meant at that dinner. It wasn't a boast. It was a warning. At 10 a.m. An emergency partners meeting was called. I walked in to find 4 other partners seated. Their expressions ranged from shock to anxiety to forced detachment. The senior partner, Mr. Su, nearly 60, had been in the industry for 30 years. He looked at me. Ms. Summers, that email last night, was it you? It was me. Do you realize what you've done? I do. He was silent for a moment. Then he slid a piece of paper in front of me. It was a suspension notice, politely worded. Pending investigation. Temporary leave of absence. The meaning was clear. I signed it. Thank you for your cooperation. Mr. Su, I'll handle this myself. It won't affect the firm's other operations. Ms. Summers, he stopped me. You're a good investor, but you went too far. Mr. Su, I paused at the door. 6 years ago, someone forged your signature on that addendum. I just turned. I didn't know into I know. He didn't respond. Outside the conference room, Emily was waiting. Her eyes were red. Don't cry. I said, I need you to do something. Compile a list of all the investors in Fund 3. Send it to my personal email. No matter what happens with Creston, I want to make sure those investors get their money back. I understand. When I walked out of the financial center, the sun was blinding. Reporters swarmed me. Questions came like machine gun fire. Miss Summers, what do you think about your suspension? Were you aware of the Huaxin deal? What is your relationship with Nathan Rhodes? I didn't answer any of them. I kept my head down and walked to the curb. Emily's car was waiting. I got in and closed the door, shutting out the noise. The car drove for a long time. I had nowhere to go. I just told the driver to loop the city. My phone buzzed a few times. Finally, I checked it. First message. From Linda Rhodes. I sent that USB drive to your assistant. The money records I'd been saving for years. Sorry I didn't give it to you sooner. Well, my brother did. I'm sorry. Second. From Henry Lou. Sarah, you did what I couldn't. Your father would be proud. Third, from my mom. No matter what. I'm here. I put the phone in my pocket and leaned back. The city scrolled by. The south side was long gone, replaced by new apartment buildings with manicured trees. Everything was clean and new. Some things were demolished, but new things grew. We stopped at a red light. I glanced out the window. We were passing a bookstore. In the window was a display of the latest issue of a financial magazine. The cover had a blurred photo of the financial center and a headline, "The Capital Maze." A complete investigation of the Huashing Creston case. I searched for Creston on my phone. News stories exploded. Nathan Rhodes, controller of Creston, detained for questioning. Grand Vision Realty operations halted. Summit Capital initiates internal review. Scrolling down, I found a comment on a forum. I heard the woman who blew the whistle was a high school dropout. Her classmates looked down on her, and now she's brought the whole thing down. Legendary. I smiled faintly and turned off the screen. That afternoon, Brian called. "Sarah, you've seen the news, right? The SEC has officially filed charges. I saw it. What's your next move? I'm going to make sure the money gets back to the people it belongs to. The investors in Fund 3. The small investors in Creston. Anyone who was hurt. As for me, I'll wait for the investigation. If I have to take responsibility, I will." Sarah, Brian said. The signature was forged. "The forensic report is clear. You won't be prosecuted. But you need to ask yourself, after this, do you want to stay in finance? I don't know. I'll decide when the dust settles. Then come find me. We'll have some tea." Roasted barley tea. Deal. By the time I hung up, it was dark. The driver asked where to go. I told him the south side. The old house was gone, but my mom was renting a small apartment nearby. When I got out, I saw a light on in the kitchen window on the 4th floor. I went up and knocked. My mom opened the door, her apron smudged with oil. She saw me and just stepped aside to let me in. On the table were 3 dishes: scrambled eggs with tomatoes, stir-fried cabbage, and a bowl of spare rib soup. A bowl of steaming rice. As if timed to perfection. "Mom, how'd you know I was coming?" "I didn't. I made too much. Leftovers for tomorrow." She handed me a pair of chopsticks. "Eat before it gets cold." I sat down. I took a bite of the eggs. They were hot, the sweet and sour juices melting on my tongue. I took a big mouthful of rice. Then I said, "Mom, I quit my job. I was suspended. But before that, I knew I had to leave. Some things just have to end." She poured me a bowl of soup and placed it by my hand. "Good. I've been wanting to say that for a while. That job kept you up all hours. You look like a ghost. Take a break. You're not going to ask why. You do things for a reason." She sat across from me. "Just like your father did." I took a sip of soup. The ribs had been stewed for a long time. The meat fell apart on my tongue. Outside, the streetlights glowed. Someone was walking their dog. The faint sound of a TV news report drifted in. I caught the words Creston Capital. My mom didn't mention the $1,000. I didn't either. Some things didn't need to be said. We ate for a long time. Afterward, I did the dishes. She sat on the couch watching TV. The channel tuned to the news. A shot of the financial center flashed on screen. The Summit Capital sign in the background. A headline running below. Summit Capital managing partner Sarah Summers cooperates with investigation. Company says it will fully cooperate. My mom looked at me. I smiled. "It's okay. I'm on TV." She smiled back. "Good. Better than your father. He never made it on TV." I stopped smiling. My father's vague silhouette rose again. He'd lent $200. It came back as $1,000. He'd helped Henry Liu, and Henry had woven a web around me for 20 years. He never said anything. He just did what he could. I walked over and sat next to my mom, resting my head on her shoulder. Her shoulder was thin, but it was warm. The news moved on to other stories. The night was quiet. Chapter 8. Dust 2 months later. The weather turned cool. The Creston case had an initial resolution. Nathan Rhodes was formally arrested on multiple charges: illegal related party transactions, false statements, and illegal fundraising. Grand Vision Realty entered bankruptcy proceedings. Ben Xian was restricted from leaving the country pending trial. Summit Capital, due to its internal investigation and cooperation, received an administrative penalty and a notice to reform, but was not shut down. The former chairman and general counsel were retroactively held accountable. Their names blacklisted. My own investigation concluded that the signature on the addendum was indeed forged. I wasn't prosecuted, but my position at Summit Capital was over. I resigned. The day I resigned, Mr. Su called me. He said 2 things. "You're a principled person. Summit's loss is our fault. And, if you ever need anything, call me." I remembered his words. I just didn't need them yet. Now, I wake at 7 every morning. I run 2 laps around the block, then come back to my mom's breakfast. She's learned new recipes. Yesterday, she made braised fish that could rival any restaurant. I do the dishes, then head out to a new place at a small office in a renovated 2-story building on the south side. The ground floor is a bakery. The upper floor is a shared studio between me and Brian. We both stepped away from our old lives to start a small investment advisory and legal consultancy. We help small investors and entrepreneurs who've been cheated by big institutions. It's a modest business, but we do every case thoroughly. This morning, I walked in to find Brian already at his computer. He handed me a coffee and pointed to a stack of files on the desk. New case. A small clean energy startup. They were conned by a fake private equity fund. 300,000. The founders are alumnus. 2 years behind you. I sat down and flipped through the materials. Can we recover it? It's tough, but not impossible. I looked at their investment agreement last night. There's a clause we can use to file a countersuit. I'm meeting the founder this afternoon. You coming? I'm in. The meeting was in the conference room upstairs. The founders were 3 young people, 2 men and 1 woman. One of the men, in a plaid shirt, had red-rimmed eyes. He said he borrowed the money from relatives. The woman sat quietly, twisting a tissue in her hands. Brian explained the legal process. I took notes and occasionally added my thoughts on the cash flow. At one point, the woman looked up and stared at me. She seemed startled. You're Sarah Summers. I blinked. You know me. I'm 2 years behind you. I remember your picture on the honor roll in high school. Her eyes brightened. You were the one who was. She trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. I smiled. Yeah, I had my rough patches, but I got through it. She smiled back, and a little of the tension left her eyes. Sunlight streamed in through the blinds, casting slatted stripes of gold across the table. Brian flipped a page. I continued drawing a cash flow diagram. The faces of the 3 young founders were a little more relaxed than when they'd arrived. It was evening when we left the office. Brian and I bought 2 cups of hot soy milk from the bakery downstairs and stood on the curb. Plain leaves had fallen everywhere. The setting sun bathed the entire lane in a warm yellow glow. Sarah, he said, do you regret it? Regret what? Blowing the lid off Creston. If you hadn't, you'd still be a managing partner at Summit, making 8 figures a year. A Porsche in the garage. I took a sip of the soy milk. It was hot, just sweet enough. If I hadn't done it, I'd still be dreaming about my mom walking away from the school that day. I'd still be lying awake at night wondering about that red mark on the utility knife. I'd still hesitate every time a class group chat appeared. I looked at him. Money is good, but without this weight off my chest, money just feels cold. Brian crushed his empty cup and tossed it in the bin. Makes sense. Come on. My mom made braised pork tonight. She said you should come over. Your mom remembers me. She said you were that skinny girl who sat in the back row. I should look out for you. I walked behind him. The setting sun stretched our shadows long and thin across the plain leaves, overlapping on the ground. A few steps later, my phone buzzed. It was Emily. She'd left Summit for another firm. She sometimes sent me messages, just to check in. This time, it was a link to a financial news site. The headline read, after that email, Sarah Summers' story and the new chapter in Capital's old debts. I didn't open it. I put my phone away. I took a few quick steps to catch up to Brian. At the corner of the lane, a new little restaurant had just opened, its warm lantern glowing in the dusk. A handwritten sign hung on the door. Today's special. Roasted barley tea, free. I smiled. Brian looked back. What are you smiling at? Nothing. Let's go eat. The lantern glowed warmly in the twilight. Plain leaves fell one by one, landing on our shoulders, then sliding off to the ground. The wind was light. The sky was clear. The 12-year debt was finally settled, and a new day was just beginning.